Hello YouTube. I just wanted to talk about my IC-7300 configuration with WSJT-X, and this could also apply to other digital mode applications as well. I just want to talk about some of the levels I set in my computer, some of the configuration for rig control, and some various things that are important to consider when operating WSJT-X. So first of all, you'll want to set your radio up, in my case the IC-7300, to work with WSJTX. With the ICOM IC-7300 it's easy because this radio has essentially a built-in USB sound card. It connects to the computer via USB. You will have audio drivers. And in this case, under ports, I can see that the radio is set to COM3, and you find that by seeing the Silicon Labs CP210X USB to UART bridge configured there. Knowing that, you then can go into WSJTX settings and configure a radio. I believe WSJTX uses hamlib, that's sort of built into it, so you just can go ahead and choose which rig you have from the vast list and assortment, and then you can set your serial port to the appropriate port as you saw in Device Manager. Now I use a COM port emulator called Virtual Serial Ports Emulator that turns my COM3 into COM2. COM2 can then be shared across multiple applications. Now I do that because I use ICOM's RSBA1 rig control software. I like to not have to touch my radio, so I use this rig control software to operate basically the front panel of the radio without having to physically touch it. Keeps it in pristine condition. It allows me to usually make adjustments to the radio power level, turn it on and off, etc. If you see COM3 in your device manager associated with your rig, and you're not using something like a virtual serial port emulator, then you'll set COM3 here. You'll probably set your baud rate higher than 9600, maybe 19200, doesn't really matter. That has to match what you have set up in the radio. Mine works better with 9600 because I use the virtual serial port emulator. And then these are the rest of the settings. Push to talk method, CAT, mode packet data packet, that tells the software to put your rig into digital USB mode. Split operation with the IC-7300, you can choose rig so it operates a true split frequency. Transmit and receive. Data bits 8, stop bits 1, no handshake. Once you've got everything working, and this turns green when you click test CAT, then you can worry about your audio input and output levels. Before you do that, you need to tell WSJTX where to expect the radio's input and output. On mine, it's the USB audio codec 2. You don't want it default audio input device or default output device because that'll be your computer's built-in microphone and the computer's speaker for output. You don't want to output the modulation to the computer speakers, you want to output the modulation to the radio. So you have to set this up appropriately. First is the receive. You want to make sure you receive clean signals into your computer so they can be properly and efficiently decoded by WSJTX. You want the audio input level graph to read give or take about 50 dBs when you have a reasonably active band with good strong signals coming in. You don't want it too high or you might overload, I suppose, the front end of either your audio microphone input or maybe the software itself. 50 dBs is what the developer suggests. And then you want to see about 30 dBs on a quiet band. Usually tuning your audio microphone inputs in your computer and the audio frequency output out of your rig, so you receive 50 dBs on an active band, will generally mean you receive somewhere around 30-35 dBs on a quiet band. First thing you'll want to do is look at your rig's settings under connectors. Now on mine, my audio frequency output level is set to 65%. At 65%, I then set in the sound settings under recording, choose the rig, properties, levels. Mine's set at 18. So my microphone input level on the computer is set to 18. My audio frequency output of the rig is set at 65. Now, one could be higher, one could be lower. You can adjust that up or down. You choose more here, you can choose less on the radio. I find this works in my configuration here. Yours may be different though, so you'll have to experiment with your audio levels. So you see 50 dBs here and roughly 30 dBs on a quiet band, 35 or so. As far as transmit levels, what you want to avoid is any ALC action on your rig. You don't want to see your ALC meter move when you're transmitting. So generally you want to back off the levels just to the point where you lose that last bar of ALC under transmit. Now that's controlled by the speaker level on your computer and the digital modulation level on your rig. So you go to playback, and on mine I choose properties, levels, and mine is set at 26. On the rig, I have my USB modulation levels set to 30%. Now, if you see any ALC action on occasion, you can use the power level control to slightly adjust this up or down, just so you don't see any ALC action on your rig. So this is kind of a fine tune here. Mine's almost all the way up. I believe it's about 1.1 dB down. That's the unit of measurement here. So it's not quite all the way up, but it's close. If I turn it all the way up, I might see one bar of ALC on the radio, usually under transmit. So I just knock it down slightly just so that ALC action disappears. You also want to make sure in your connectors that the rig understands that when it receives modulation from the computer, that it sets itself into digital mode. So it's not expecting modulation from your microphone, from this. So data mod is USB, data off mod is microphone. So if I'm not using the computer and I want to pick up the mic and do SSB phone or whatever, the rig knows to expect it appropriately. One important thing to also consider, which I believe is pretty well documented, is time synchronization. Very critical that your timing for transmit and receive and decoding is accurate. Your computer's clock, even though it's controlled by usually Windows or Mac's time servers, doesn't update enough to ensure that you have a properly synchronized system clock. I use an application called Dimension 4. And Dimension 4 I have set to run automatically anytime the computer boots up, and to automatically, periodically sync the clock. So as you can see, it adjusted my clock about half a second the last time it was run today at 3:15 p.m. with that particular time server. That ensures my system clock is synchronized with everybody else's, so when I start transmitting, everybody else starts receiving. When they start transmitting, WSJTX automatically expects to receive precisely at the proper time to a fraction of a second. That's real important. Can't skip that. There may be other time server applications out there. Dimension 4, I believe, was free and relatively simple to configure, and it works very well. I think that's all I had for this video. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. 7-3.